guys, welcome back to Binge Watch Britney. In today's episode, we are going to be covering the Vampire Diaries Season 6. So we do have a lot to talk about, and I really do hope that I cover the main things that happen in Season 6. There's obviously a lot of episodes, and so it won't be easy for me to recap every single little thing that happens in Season 6. But the reason for this is obviously because it's been so long now since I actually watched Season 6. It's probably been maybe 6 months or more, if not longer, just because I did binge watch this and I just never got around to recording an episode for Season 6. So today we are taking the time to do that. So I really want to just call out that I really love Bonnie's hair in Season 6. Obviously, with her going back to the 1990s, we are seeing kind of that change in hairstyles and fashion. And so I really thought that this was her best look of all of the Vampire Diaries seasons, just because we know that she did wear a wig for most of the seasons. We saw that she did this YouTube video in real life talking about the struggles of being a black actress in Hollywood and making movies, making TV shows, and just not having the proper care for her hair. So as a result of that, she did spend a lot of the series wearing a wig. And so I really think that short bob that she had was the best look on her in all of the seasons. And so I was just really happy coming into Season 6 and seeing kind of them bringing out that beauty in her and properly styling her and dressing her, because she really pulled off all of the looks in that season, as far as like the 90s vibe, and it really just reminded me of Jada Pinkett. And so I really just wanted to take the time to call that out, because I know that with Bonnie's character and the actress in real life, Kat Graham, there is a lot of talk of like the racism and just like the issues that black people experience when it comes to being an actor. So with all of that being said, let's go ahead and get into the rest of the episode. So for our 5 key points, for the first point, Bonnie and Damon meet Kai in the 1994 prison world. So we know that at the end of Season 5, the other side has collapsed. We know that Bonnie and Damon did not basically make it back to the real world, so instead they are transported somehow to 1994. And so we do see that Elena's old house is still up. We see obvious signs that they are stuck in the past, that they have gone back to the past. And so eventually, they're just trying to make the best of the situation. They're living in the Salvatore's mansion in the 1990s, so it looks a little bit different from how we are used to seeing it in the current timeline. And so here, Bonnie and Damon really have a chance to build a relationship and really kind of figure out how to live together, because essentially they are stuck together. What they notice is that there are weird things happening, things are going missing, things are showing up when they shouldn't be. For example, I think Damon had a certain car that showed up in the parking lot, and so they are noticing weird things that shouldn't be happening, and they realize that there's another person there with them. That person's name is Kai. So they eventually learn that Kai can basically help them get back to the current timeline, and he obviously wants to go with them. They don't really know anything about Kai. They just know that he's this other person there. Kai is a witch. He can do certain things, I believe, but he doesn't have all the pieces that he needs in order to get himself back to his timeline. And so with them meeting Kai, this is where we really learn about the Ascendant, and it's mentioned several times throughout the rest of the seasons, because it is a key component that is needed when you are traveling in between worlds the way that they are doing. And then the other thing that kind of happened around this time is that we have this battle between Bonnie, Kai, and Damon with trying to get back to the current timeline. And we have this fight that breaks out between Kai and Damon. We have Bonnie getting injured, and she's realizing that she doesn't have enough magic or power, I think, to send both her and Damon back while fighting off Kai. And so only Damon makes it back, and the Ascendant is destroyed, and basically Bonnie is stuck with Kai in that 1994 prison world. And Bonnie's main focus was making sure that Kai didn't make it back to the current timeline, because they were really realizing that he wasn't a good person. going into my second point, Elena wipes her memories of Damon. So Elena is really struggling to live her life without Damon. She was obviously very in love with him. We do see a few moments where she is taking drugs to hallucinate Damon and pretend that she is still with him. And so she is really, really having a hard time with this. And she ends up going to Alaric, who is a vampire at this point, and she asks him to wipe her memories so that she can forget that she ever loved Damon. And we do see that this is a bit of a struggle for him to be able to do this, because she has to identify the moment that she fell in love with him. And I think that moment is when she was still with Stefan. And so that kind of makes it complicated for her to kind of like admit that she loved somebody else while she was with Stefan. And so once they are able to identify the moment that she fell in love with him, Alaric is able to do the compulsion and kind of get her to forget about Damon. But she thinks of him as a monster, and so this is kind of very extreme in helping her deal with the loss of Damon. And then we do have something happening where basically Alaric ends up being killed, and I think he somehow ends up crossing the magic barrier that is around Mystic Falls. So basically, the vampires will be stripped of their powers and killed if they cross that barrier, something like that. And so he ends up in that situation, and he is killed. Joe is able to save him, and he comes back to life, but he's not supernatural anymore. This is problematic because now he can't undo the compulsion, and I believe around this time is when Damon comes back and he's really struggling with this new Elena. And so obviously they were really counting on Alaric being able to undo the compulsion at any point in time once Elena was ready. I did mention Joe just now, and so this is someone that Alaric meets early on in the season. She's a new doctor. She's really into Alaric, and he's obviously trying to keep her on the fence, keep her from getting too close to him just because of everything that happened with Jenna and how that turned out. He obviously doesn't want to hurt another woman, and so we realize that there's a lot more to Joe than what we initially think. And later on we learn that she is a witch, and she is related to the twin witches that we met in the previous season, Liz and Luke. And we see them realizing this connection when they are at, I believe, either Elena's house, maybe not Elena's house because it was blown up, but they are at somebody's house. Maybe it's the Salvatore mansion. Where I'm picturing it in my head doesn't look like that, so I can't recall what house they're in exactly. But one of the twins, either Liv or Luke, is playing a video, and Joe recognizes her voice on that video, and so she realizes that, hey, these are my siblings, we're related. And so then we learn about their family history, and they are from the Gemini Coven. This is a coven of witches, and they have the coven is ruled by one person from a set of twins. And so what we learn is that Joe and Kai were a set of twins. They were supposed to be the next in line. They would have to do a merge that would basically allow one twin to defeat the other, because the one who was defeated was considered weaker. And so I believe Joe was the weaker of the two, because Kai had these really psychopathic tendencies. He was not a good person. He was not fit to rule the coven. And so there was this night where he attacked the family, and he was trying to kill everyone so that he could take power. And so what was happening, I think, is that Kai and Joe might have been passed up once the next set of twins were born, and that set of twins would have been able to take over the coven instead of Kai, because he was not good enough. And so he tried to eliminate the second set of twins, Luke and Liv, so that he could be the next person in line again, basically. And so this is what leads to the family being split up. We have this moment where we see that Joe has done something, and the father of that family, he has basically sent Kai to the 1994 prison world so that he can't hurt them anymore. And so we have this family kind of being reunited and kind of trying to figure out where they go from here, with knowing what their family history is and what it looks like for them moving forward. And we also have Tyler and Liv dating. We know that Tyler and Caroline split up. We know that Tyler is human again. I can't recall why, but he is human again, and he's dating Liv. And we do have this moment where Tyler and Liv are together. They're at a corn maze, and somehow he ends up causing a really bad accident. And this is very problematic because if someone dies directly from Tyler's action, that will trigger the werewolf curse again, and he will be a werewolf again. And so we do see this moment where there is someone who is very badly injured from the crash that Tyler caused, and Liv basically kills that person so that the death is on her and not on Tyler. We also see Elena healing a few people, I think, with her blood during this time, and so that obviously is something that Tyler benefits from. Going into my third point, Bonnie goes to the 1903 prison world. So we know that Damon has made it back. She is still stuck with Kai in the 1994 prison world, and she doesn't trust him. She doesn't want to help him. She's scared of him, and so nothing is pretty much going well for her at this time. And so what we learn is that Kai is really trying to figure out how to activate her magic again, and she can't do any magic at all. And so what we realized happened is that she had sent a teddy bear to the current timeline, and that teddy bear, she hid her magic in the teddy bear. So she did that so that Kai cannot manipulate her, because he needs her magic and he needs her blood, because he's been stripped of his magical powers. And so Kai is able to figure out this, and he ends up forcing Bonnie to take a road trip with him back to his family's house. And so we see this house, and it's obviously stuck in the 1994 timeline. Actually, it's the actual house, but it's just like a replica of it in the 1994 prison world. And so they end up driving to his family's house, and he's basically telling her the story, I think, of his family. And he realized that from what she did with Mr. Cuddles, he realizes what his sister did to him back in the actual real world, and he realizes that his sister hid her magic in a knife, and he knows where she hid it. And so he's able to find that knife, and he is able to regain magic by absorbing his sister's magic that she hid in the object in the knife, and he is able to get himself back to the current timeline without Bonnie's help. He really just needs her blood at this point. And so this leaves Bonnie in a very bad position, because I think one of the issues that they have is that they have a broken ascendant. They can't fix it. I think now that he has magic, he can fix it. Now that he has her blood, he can basically travel to wherever he wants to go without being kind of restricted by the things that he did not have access to before Bonnie and Damon came into the picture. And then around the same time, we have obviously Damon and Elena really trying to figure out how to get Damon and Bonnie back, and Stefan at some point discovers or learns about the Gemini Coven. I think this was early on in the season, where he actually went to that same house in the current timeline, but the land that house was on, the house was cloaked, and so it looked like there was nothing there anymore. And so there's this moment where they end up kicking Mr. Cuddles for whatever reason at the general direction of the house, and then the house shows up. And so this is where they learn about the Gemini Coven. They meet the father and kind of find out about Kai and the twins, and that Kai is dangerous. And so this is where the father kind of goes on the defensive, and I think he kidnaps Damon, and he is really adamant about not letting Kai return, because he knows that Kai is very dangerous for the family, just because of how powerful he'll be and all of the power that he'll have at his disposal in the form of the other witches in the coven. And then we do have, at another point, we have Damon and Elena going back to the 1994 world. I think they're there to bring Bonnie back, but how they do this is through an ascendant that is taken from Joe, because I guess there's several versions of it, and they are able to get back into the 1994 world. Bonnie has to travel from Seattle to Mystic Falls, which is in Virginia basically, so she has to drive across the country, and she is very short on time. They have a very small window that they have in order to get Bonnie back with them so that they can all three go back. And so I think they have maybe several hours, But what happens is Damon and Lane are exploring, they're at the house, but then Liv is the one who's kind of like powering them being able to go back, and we see that she is under attack from Kai or something like that, and so she's forced to bring them back early without Bonnie. And so Bonnie, I think, doesn't get this communication, and she shows up to the house, can't find them, and then she realizes that she missed her chance to go back to the current timeline. We also have Kai at some point getting captured, and he's tied up kind of like in the graveyard area. He is being his annoying self. He is psychotic, he's sarcastic, he's not a pleasant person to be around, and you can just tell that something is wrong with him every time he opens his mouth, and just like even with certain facial expressions that he's making. And so what happens is they have him captured, they have him tied up, and his hands are free, and he's kind of like just talking, and then at some point we have him realizing that he can absorb magic from the barrier around Mystic Falls, like via the ground. And so what we know about Kai at this point is that he is a siphoner. That means that he can take power from other beings, and so he's able to absorb the power from the ground in Mystic Falls. This eliminates the barrier, and this also gives him the power that he needs to break out of captivity and kind of terrorize the town, basically. And so what this leads to is that Kai is really pressuring Joe to do the merge with him so that he can take over. Joe is the weaker one, and she's even weaker because she's been without her magic for so long. And so the merge can only be done in certain situations, and Joe, I think, needs her magic, but she's not willing to accept it back. And so Kai kind of threatened Liv or Luke so that Joe is forced to willingly take back her magic, and then that will allow them to do the merge where he can defeat her. And so I think they start the merge. Joe is obviously losing. Luke is the stronger one between him and Liv, and so he steps in for Joe to complete the merge. And I think the assumption is that Luke should have a good chance to win because he's the stronger one, but he ends up being overpowered, and he's basically absorbed by Kai. That's the end of it for Luke, and now we're dealing with the reality of Kai having all of this power, of Luke having been killed, of Liv kind of like upset about losing her brother, of Joe understanding what has happened, the father understanding what has happened. And so the world is not in a good place now that Kai has all of his power and that he is essentially the new leader of the coven. The next thing that we have happening is that somehow Bonnie ends up going to a different timeline. I can't recall if she's able to fix the Ascendant or if there's some other kind of like natural occurrence that allows her to travel to a different timeline. And so she ends up going to the 1903 prison world, and she is kind of aware of the fact that she is in a completely different time period because of how the Salvatore mansion looks. It looks like it's in the early 1900s, and so she is trying to get back to the cave where she needs to do the ritual, because I think there is an aurora or something like that in the sky, so she is able to, I think, do magic without having all the full tools that she would need. I can't quite recall, but she is in a rush to get back to this cave. She's about to go back to, I guess, the 1994 timeline or back to her current timeline, and then she meets this woman in the cave, and what we realize is that this woman who is in the cave, her name is Lily, and I think somehow maybe Bonnie misses the time frame to get back or whatever, and so she's kind of stuck with Lily. She learns that this is a woman who has a family with her. They're vampires. They are desiccated. They are very low on blood, and she is unwilling to leave them behind in order to leave and go to a new timeline. And so I think there is another occurrence of that same event, the Aurora, and Bonnie is able to get back to the real world. Going into my fourth point, Caroline's mom dies. So we learn kind of halfway through the season or so that Caroline's mom has cancer, and then we learn that Caroline gives her mother vampire blood thinking that this will cure the cancer. And so at this point, prior to her giving the vampire blood to her mother. She is really trying to convince everyone that this is the right thing to do, but obviously Stefan and Damon, they're the older vampires of this group, and so they're saying, in our time of being vampires, we've never heard of vampire blood being able to heal cancer. This is not the way to go. And she's really not listening to them or whatever, and so she tries this out on another patient. She thinks everything is going well. She gives her mother the blood, and then we, the viewers, see that the patient is throwing up and all of this stuff. And so it turns out that patient became a vampire, and he still has the cancer, and he's in a lot of pain. And so we do have Caroline and Stefan realizing that this did not work. It actually made things a lot worse. And then Caroline's having to tell her mother, I basically made the cancer even worse for you. This is what you're going to go through. And so Caroline had a lot of guilt about this because she definitively caused her mother's death because she made it worse, she sped it up and all of that stuff. And so she's really just dealing with losing her mother. And we see that there's this moment where she is being taught to ride a bike by her mom, Liz, and it's kind of like a moment of her mother getting Caroline to trust herself that she's able to ride the bike without support. And we see Liz kind of letting go, and it's very symbolic of how Caroline has to move forward in the world without her mother and without her support, but knowing that she still loves her and wants the best for her. We do see that Liz eventually passes away. We see a funeral for her, and we also see that this is the moment where Matt joins up for the police force because of the impact that Liz and the other police officers have had on Mystic Falls. And so as a result of her mother dying, Caroline goes completely off the rails. Everyone is really trying to get through to her. Nothing is working. And so after she has done some things, she is finally willing to make a deal with the other people in her friend group that she'll be good for a year, but they keep trying to get her to turn her humanity back on. So basically she wants them to leave her alone for a year without her humanity on, but they keep pressuring her, and so this backfires, and she ends up forcing Stefan to turn off his humanity in order to save Sarah. And Sarah is a relative of Stefan's that we'll talk about in a second. And so what we have happening is that Lily and Bonnie basically, returning from the 1903 prison world. We have Damon kind of really learning about what happened to his mother. The belief that they both had, Stefan and Damon, was that their mother was killed, that she left them, and in reality, she was put into this prison world for this specific reason, which we'll also talk about in a little bit. And so basically we had the gang trying to figure out how to get both Caroline and Stefan to turn their humanity back on. And so I mentioned that Stefan did this to save Sarah. So earlier on in the season, Enzo discovered that there is another Salvatore. This is Sarah Salvatore, and Enzo is really kind of aware of the fact that Stefan is keeping this secret. He doesn't know what it is, and so he's really doing everything that he can to find out what Stefan is up to. And so once Enzo realizes who Sarah is, he's very upset with Stefan for allowing Damon to think that he killed off the family line. And so there was a story that I think Cousin Jack or something like that, he had a wife, Damon killed the wife who was pregnant, and so Damon thinks that he essentially ruined the Salvatore line, the rest of it. And so what we find out is that Stefan actually saved the wife or saved the baby or whatever, and he has been keeping her a secret from Damon. He has given her kind of an inheritance or whatever. He makes sure that she is taken care of, and Stefan really does not appreciate the fact that Enzo has discovered this and that he's threatening to harm Sarah in order to force Stefan to be honest with Damon. And while Enzo is discovering all of this, he's using Matt to get close to Sarah to figure out why she is so important. And so we kind of have Matt and Sarah developing a relationship and kind of have this moment where Enzo is really forcing Sarah to understand that she is related to vampires and that the world is not as wholesome as she thinks it is, because she is unaware of her connection to the supernatural. And then another thing that we have happening is that with Lily coming back with Bonnie, we have Damon kind of like working out that relationship, trying to bond with his mother again. And so one of the things that he wants Lily to do, because I think both boys have a really strong connection to their mother, he wants Lily to help Stefan turn his humanity back on because they want a mother figure. And so Lily is only willing to do this as long as they give her the ascendant so that she can go back and get her family that they left behind in the 1903 prison world. And one of the things that we have happening is that at some point Damon is wanting to get another version of the cure for Elena. I'm not sure what happened to the one from the 1994 world, but he basically needs to go to the 1903 prison world to get another version of the cure. And so this is kind of where Bonnie comes in, because Kai, for whatever reason, wants to make amends with Bonnie because he feels really guilty about it, and he wants to apologize to her. Bonnie is really upset that Damon is even helping Kai in this way just because of what he did to her. And so for whatever reason, they end up going to the 1903 prison world, and I think it's so that Damon can get the cure, but it's also so that Kai can kind of like help make amends. And so what happens is that Bonnie forces Kai to be stuck in the 1903 prison world, and Damon's able to bring back the cure for Elena, and she's able to take it, because we do see that when Damon first came back earlier on in the season, they really struggled to kind of like rebuild their relationship because she didn't remember him, she didn't remember her love for him, and it was a very huge struggle for them to kind of figure out what they were to each other and how to move forward, because obviously Damon still loved Elena and he had to deal with the fact that she didn't even recognize him, didn't know him, and kind of wanted nothing to do with him. And so we do have this moment earlier on this season where she tries to cross that barrier that is around Mystic Falls, and this is before Kai had a chance to undo it, but this would have caused death for her. And so Damon's able to pull her back. She gets glimpses of some memory, but it's not enough for her to realize that she was actually in love with Damon and how much she was in love with him. And so when we get to this point where Damon presents her with the cure again, she's able to take it, and this actually undoes the compulsion and it makes her human. And I was reading somewhere that this is a parallel to how she first fell in love with him, because she was human, turned into a vampire, realized that she had feelings for Damon. I can't recall what the term was, but everyone thought that she was basically in love with him because he was the one whose blood was used to turn her into a vampire, but that was not the case. She was actually in love with him. And so we have this moment where she's taking the cure, she is undoing the compulsion, and she's remembering her feelings for Damon. And the other parallel with that is that she actually met Damon first and he compelled her to forget. And so when she became a vampire, she remembered that she actually met Damon first before she met Stefan, because that was the thing that she had said, that if she had met Damon first, maybe things would have been different, and then you find out that she actually didn't meet Damon first. And so we have this moment in season 6 where she's human again, the compulsion is being undone, and she realizes what she feels for Damon. And going into the 5th point, Alaric and Joe have a wedding. So Kai is able to return from the 1903 prison world, and he returns with Lily and her heretics. And so basically when he was stuck there, he made a deal with them to escape. And we, by now, I think have learned Lily's story, and it's that she was imprisoned by the Gemini Coven because she was a Ripper and she was just really doing bad things. And so we also learned that Lily has a history with Enzo. He, I think, was in danger of dying or something like that, and she saved him, and she was the one, I think, who turned him into a vampire. And so everything is kind of being tied together in these final moments of season 6. And so we have Kai returning, and he crashes Alaric and Joe's wedding. We have learned just before the wedding that Joe is pregnant. She's pregnant with twins, I believe, and Alaric was already planning to get married, get engaged to her, whatever, and so they make this wedding happen. And so we have Alaric and Joe kind of at the altar, about to say their vows, and then we see that Kai is cloaked, and then he's uncloaked, and he stabs Joe in the belly, and he's doing this because the twins that she is giving birth to would be the next one in line, and they would be threatening his reign of terror and all of his power over the coven. And so what we have happening is that somehow Kai is able to link himself to all of the other witches in the coven. He kills himself, and that causes the rest of the coven to die by default, but he made himself a heretic through Lily and her heretic, and so this causes him to come back to life. So he's killed off basically everyone who could challenge him. He has basically ended the Gemini coven, and then we have this twin kind of in a weird state because obviously they were in the belly when Jo was stabbed in her stomach. And so what we have happening is that Kai at some point ends up linking Elena's life to Bonnie. She's human, and what this means is that one cannot live while the other is living. So Elena's asleep while Bonnie's alive, and then if Elena becomes awake, then that means that Bonnie's going to be asleep. And so obviously this is a huge point of concern for Damon because he is in love with Elena, but he's developed this really amazing friendship with Bonnie from them being stuck in the 1994 prison world. And so we see that Kai understands how much Damon loves Elena, and so he is basically presenting him with this choice to either kill Bonnie or let Bonnie be killed so that Elena comes back to life. And we see this moment where they're at the wedding. This is the aftermath of everything. All of the witches are dying. Jo is dying. And we see that Bonnie, I think, has been injured, and Kai is basically threatening her life. And so we see this moment where Kai is like daring Damon to intervene. He's like, I'm sorry, Bonnie, and he walks away. And then this is a really huge moment for Bonnie because she thinks that Damon is abandoning her while she's in this very vulnerable position. But what happens is Damon sneaks up on Kai and he chops his head off. And so he is able to rescue Bonnie, and he proves that he's not willing to sacrifice her just to bring Elena back. And so this was a huge moment because I really thought that he was going to abandon Bonnie, and that would have just ruined everything that they had built up leading to this point. And so I was really glad that he cared enough for Bonnie to save her life and put, I guess, his own needs and selfish desires on the back seat, because he was always willing to do whatever as long as it meant that Elena was safe or whatever. And so he was willing to sacrifice other people for Elena, and we see this one moment where he is not willing to do that. And then what we have happening after this is that the gang has to say goodbye to Elena, and they need to keep her body safe because while Bonnie is living, she won't be, and they have to work to really try to find a way to undo the spell that Kai has put on both Elena and Bonnie. And so what we see in the final scene of season 6 is that Mystic Falls is falling apart. We know that Matt has become a cop because he signed up to be one in the aftermath of Liz's funeral and her death. And we see that Damon is really unstable. We see him on top of the clock tower. He's thinking about suicide. He's having to obviously live his life without Elena. And so we just see that nothing is like it used to be in Mystic Falls, and we learn why in season 7, and that is where season 6 ends. So, to wrap up this episode, with Elena and Bonnie having that spell on them, we know that this is the storyline to explain the fact that Nina Dobrev, the actress who plays Elena, is leaving the Vampire Diaries, and so she is really not going to be a huge part of the show going forward. Obviously, she's going to make appearances here and there through flashbacks and that sort of thing, but going into season 7, they need to find a new center since she's no longer going to be the focus. So that leaves a lot of questions about how the show will continue on and what the storylines will be, because they're really going to have to develop the storylines around the other characters who have always been side characters to what is going on with Elena and Damon, Elena and Stefan, and just like everyone being after Elena. So the show is always centered around Elena up until this point, and so season 7 is where they prove that the other characters in the show can carry the show. And yes, that's all I have for you in this episode. I'm really excited to be recapping season 7 again. I've already watched it. It's just a matter of me putting my notes together and sitting down and recording an episode. But yeah, let's go ahead and end this video. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.